Good afternoon. As you have been told, my name is Damaris Bonareri, and today I get to lead a conversation on two of my most favorite topics: migration, tech, and digital issues in Africa. Now, when you're told about migration and Africans, what comes at the top of your mind? Most people think it's Africans trying to run away from home. They're headed to Europe or the US or the UK and maybe Canada. But research and statistics show that intra African migration is leading. Africans want to stay at home, Africans want to move within their own continent. But we have very rigid visa regimes. I don't know how many of you have been moving around. I'm sure when you came to Kenya, it was a bit easier because of the ETA. But I've been stuck at the airport in one of African countries every now and then, waiting for an approval to move in. Of course, except within the East African community, where as East Africans we're able to move freely. So we have rigid visa regimes, we have fragmented border systems, outdated legal frameworks that has frustrated moving in Africa. In 2018, the African Union, in a bid to achieve the AU Agenda for 2063, the African Union launched the African Passport. Now, the realization of this passport, when it happens, it means that we should be able to move within Africa as Africans without visas. In the same 2018, the AU adopted the Protocol on the Free Movement of Persons. This protocol has since been signed by 32 countries, and as at last year, I'm not sure about the current data, only 4 countries had ratified the protocol. That is short of 15 countries to ratify it for it to take effect. The Protocol on the Movement of Persons in Africa has the same agenda as the African Passport to ensure that Africans can move freely within Africa. As at the end of 2024, 26 African countries were offering e-visas for Africans. And this is up from 9 countries that were doing so in 2016. So there's an improvement, but you can see that technology is entering the group. Now, currently, only 48 African countries grant visa-free travel to at least one African country. And then only very few, I'm yet to get the correct number, but only very few allow all Africans to enter without any visa requirements. Among them, we have Benin, Rwanda, Seychelles, the Gambia, and as of last week, Kenya entered the group chat. What about movement of Africans to other countries? The EU recently just adopted their migration pact that makes it even more frustrating for people to get in. They're protecting their borders. The UK and the US have also been very strict about their borders. The first time I traveled to the UK on the visa application, they wanted to know when my mother and my father were born. A friend recently says her mother was applying for a visa to the US and they wanted to know the details of her sons, her daughters-in-law, and her sons-in-law. A lot of data going out, issues of data protections come in. So there is that issue of restrictive immigration laws, visa denials, discriminatory, and some of them are because of AI-powered systems and algorithms that are biased. In 2019, Foxglove International, I don't know if you've heard of it, they filed a judicial review application against the Home Office in the UK because of the algorithm within the systems they were using for qualifying visas. It was racially biased. Just a month ago, I heard from a friend who is at the European, I forget, a university. She's doing research on Nordic countries who are they are doing asylum process decision making using AI. Now, how does AI work? AI has large language models, and these large language models have to be trained by prior information. And because they are trained by files that are in existence, then they are already biased because of the information that they are fed. So asylum seekers trust the machines more than the people who are doing the decision making. What they don't know is that these machines already are biased. Fortunately for the EU, they have the AI Act, they have the GDPR, they have the Digital Services Act, which Africa is still far away from. So as much as people say that technology has made it more efficient, streamlined visa applications, appointment scheduling, submission of documents, facial recognition, and entry biometrics, etc., there have also been other issues that have come in. And I've mentioned the discriminatory approach of that, but there's also the issues of data protection, the issues of surveillance, and many others. So the topic today and the panel that I'm going to meet, we're going to talk about migration, law, and emerging technologies, which should be a concern for Africa because we have forced migration, refugees and asylum seekers, with Kenya currently hosting about 800,000 plus. Uganda is leading and third in the world, actually hosting about 1.9 refugees and asylum seekers from all the countries that were mentioned in the last panel, except for Tanzania, of course. Labor migration is happening, businesses, people moving to settle, marriage, and all of those other things. So definitely this is a topic that needs to be had. Can take 2 questions, then we move to the panel discussion.
Okay, thank you. I have got a very short question. There are over 50 African countries with different policy frameworks and different systems of law. So I want to know, how is it possible for them to coordinate when it comes to visa migration? Because they are also living in an era where the West African countries are Francophone, East African are Anglophone, and some are speaking Arabic. Now, I wonder, how can you really integrate these visas? Because it's very costly sometimes to travel from one African country to the other than traveling outside Africa.
Thank you for that. Not sure whether, Martha, you're the one to answer that or the panel that comes after. You let me know. We can have one more question, then we invite the panel.
Hi, my name is Queen Mtove from Tanganyika Law Society. I was applying a visa to outside, but it was refused. Reason that my bank statement was not sufficient to live there in their country. Now, if it is possible for them, we can make a policy or whatever from our African, they should return our application fee for their visa. As you can see, $6 million, more than $7 million are left to them due to their denial from our application for visa. That's my opinion. They should return our application fee. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the comments. I'm happy that we are a group of lawyers here. Maybe a group of us should come together for strategic litigation. And maybe Palu, I heard the president is it the vice president for Palu was here? We may need to do something to get those funds back at the European Court of Human Rights. Now to welcoming our next panel that is going to still talk about free movement in Africa and outside, and tech and law. We have Professor Linda Adhiambo Oucho. I don't know if she is around. Linda Oucho is the Executive Director of the African Migration and Development Policy Center in Nairobi. She's a part-time professor at the European University Institute's Migration Policy Center in Florence. She recently served as a Scholar of Excellence under Canada's CERC program in Toronto Metropolitan University. She holds a PhD in ethnic relations from the University of Warwick, where she focused on African Women's Migration Agency. She has done a lot of research on migration in Africa and out. Professor Linda Adhiambo Oucho. Our next speaker, she's a friend of mine. Our next speaker is Felix Kabara Chege. He is a distinguished expert in strategic management and information systems, renowned for his ability to seamlessly align IT strategies with business goals to drive organizational success. He's the founder of Real Sources Africa, an African continental free trade area trading company. He's at the forefront of connecting African manufacturers with global markets, promoting economic growth and enhancing trade across the continent. He serves as a board member of the Micro and Small Enterprise Authority under Kenya's Ministry of Cooperatives. He's the chairman of the Intra-Africa Trade Committee at the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And he is the African Continental Free Trade Area Advisor to the President and Chair of the Governing Council of the Trans-Pacific Africa Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Felix Kabara Chege. A round of applause. As Felix is approaching to sit, we have another participant online. The name is Rai Friedman. This is the founder and CEO of Global Rights Defenders, an NGO dedicated to advocating for refugee and human rights worldwide. She's a migration and human rights specialist with over 8 years of experience advancing policy and governance reforms for forcibly displaced populations across East Africa, the Middle East, Europe, and North America. She holds a master's in public policy and global affairs from the University of British Columbia. Her expertise spans legal identity, access to justice, inclusive economic systems, and refugee participation in legal and policy framework. Rai Friedman, she's joining us online. A round of applause. The first question goes to Linda Oucho. It's 2 questions in one. Say how are African migration patterns evolving? And I know you've done a lot of research on this, especially within the continent. How are they evolving? And what socioeconomic factors are shaping this mobility?
Thank you so much, Damaris, for that, and thank you for the invitation. I did have a PowerPoint, so I was hoping they would share it so I can show some facts. But maybe I'll give you an overview of my organization. We are a research think tank that looks at migration within Africa, and we look at the governance space and mobility. So we try to understand the trends, the impact in Africa on migration. So what we are seeing is what Damaris actually said. There's a lot of intra-African mobility that's taking place in Africa and more within our region. So if you just think about it, if you're to migrate in Africa or in Kenya, you're more likely to go to Uganda, Tanzania, or Rwanda because it's close by, the requirements are not stringent, and it's actually easier for you to move to different countries. But in our region, it's quite mixed. We do have people moving for economic reasons, which is the main reason. Thank you so much. Next slide. I was trying to fit into the whole topic of AI, so I had to put the whole digital eye there for us to have a conversation. So I'm hoping that the slide that is next, it will showcase the flows of migration, which is what Damaris had mentioned, that most of it is in Africa. And most of it in our region is in the Eastern Africa, and Kenya is a big economic hub. So there are many people coming here for economic reasons. But we also have people seeking asylum, displaced by conflict, but also by climatic shocks. So this data that is reflected here is from the UN Desert data, showing that in the middle, as you can see, migration is mostly within Africa. And on the extreme right, migration from Africa is going mostly to Europe, that's the one in the middle, and to North America, and to a certain extent, Latin America, Asia. Yeah, I think that's Asia. The color code is very interesting. Next slide, please. This was just to reflect on the number of migrants in Africa by region, and East and West Africa is not surprising. It's the biggest flow. And the thing we have in Africa is that they're so mixed that how do you regulate people who are fleeing conflict, who seek economic opportunities in your country, but also seek to explore other economic opportunities in another country or in another region. So that's how complex our migration is. We can't say someone is moving for one reason. They could be moving for several reasons, but the primary one that they're moving is for economic reason. So the next slide is also another reflection of where East Africans go. So the assumption that we see, I'm sure in the media, you see a lot of people going to Europe and you hear the stories of people desiring to go to Europe. But if you see the way it's going, most of them are moving within the region and mostly outside the region. But those who move to Europe are mostly from North Africa. But this is to say, in North Africa, there are a lot of West Africans who were seeking alternative livelihoods in Europe, but through irregular patterns. And those are the stories that you see in the media of modern slavery in Northern African countries. And that's where the flow is actually quite big. Time, okay. So I just thought I'll just show these corridors, just to say that we are moving within these regions because it's our historical patterns. Burkina Faso and Cote d'Ivoire, people have been moving there before colonialism. So these are historical patterns. They're not going to change. What we're trying to do is regulate their mobility. And we're regulating it through legal processes and regional instruments. So I think there was someone who mentioned something about regional frameworks and continental frameworks. We're trying to do that by creating an overview of what we can do to move labor migrants, students, and manage displaced people. But at the same time, we're also trying to move the whole continent. How do we do that collectively? And countries have to actually review their immigration policies or their mobility policies to ease that kind of mobility. So maybe I'll stop there and I'll share other slides if necessary.
Okay, I have more questions for you later. I'll move to Felix first. We have the Free Movement Protocol that was adopted in 2018 by the African Union. How do you think it interfaces with the current visa systems, and what implementation gaps still persist?
Thank you so much. Allow me to start off by giving a very small story of a situation I had a few weeks ago. So about 2 weeks ago, I happened to be in Abuja. I took a flight from Nairobi all the way to Abuja, got to Abuja, and unfortunately, they have gotten rid of the aspect of the visa on arrival. So you have to apply for a visa online, get an approval before you leave the country, and then once you get there, you have to have all your papers in check. So I get there, and I'm here to have my visa approval with me on the phone. I've made all the payments about 3 times, desperate enough, trying to make it work, and I'm there stranded and put up in a room and told you cannot move forward. We have to deport you back to your country. And we had a whole altercation until finally, after 3 hours, almost 4 hours of waiting, I got my email back. What I'm trying to say is that one of the biggest challenges that we've had in terms of implementation of the Free Movement Protocol, which ideally was to ease in the movement of both labor, services, and people intending to trade, has been the implementation itself from a technology perspective. We have different systems that have been implemented by different corridors to facilitate issuance of the visas. We call them the travel document that is nowadays applied online. And it's been a bit of a challenge to implement across the different regions on the basis of the different kind of technology infrastructure that every government has. But other than that, we have so many countries that, yes, have ratified, but have not yet domesticated it. So you get to a point whereby we will see of ratification, but practical use and implementation at the ground level is actually not yet there. But at the same time, we also need to create demand to why people should travel across the region. And I feel that is where everything starts from. If I create demand for need of labor, for example, in Nigeria, It means we are all looking at opportunities that are available in Nigeria for us to travel and take advantage of the opportunities that are there. If it's trading opportunities that are there, those are the reasons why most people travel. Tourism. So I think also demand for the reasons for traveling is what we have yet to really, really push. As much as we say that we have opportunities across the continent, but we have to create awareness to those opportunities and create the demands that we need to travel. And demand itself will push the conversation. People who require the services, be it legal, be it tech, be it business services, we will demand for implementation of these protocols on the basis that there is a demand that has been created and a supply that is required to fulfill that demand. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. And just to still stay with you, you've mentioned that we have different technology infrastructure in the different regions and even countries. That's one of the challenges. Just want to know what other challenges are there in harmonizing our digital border systems in Africa, and then how can AI be leveraged to enhance mobility and regional integration?
Other than that, I think there has been issues of security concerns. And different kind of political views from the people who are supposed to be the main implementers. This is government per se, whereby we're seeing different governments becoming a bit cagey with opening up for security reasons, but also as much as you say political reasons. I may not want to mention some countries in particular, but at the same time, we're seeing we have a lot of aspects to do with some policy silos or legal silos. And these mainly talk about the data protection kind of policies depending on the different countries that are there, because we are yet to have a well-streamlined data protection kind of policies across the entire region. So, and this is one of the factors that would make quite a number of countries be a bit cagey with the information. But finally, we lack proper technology that we support in aspects to do with the tracking, I'd say approval of some of these policies, and in an interoperability kind of perspective whereby we don't have a system that will be able to support tracking of either traders who want to move across the region on tourism aspects, support aspects to do with processing of work permits. But more so, and one of the solutions that I hope we are able to come up with, talk of maybe an AI-powered AFCFTA travel app or something that will be able to not only support you on application of the visa itself, but also every element of be it a work permit that is required. And right now, digitally, some of those activities should be done. And because not all countries across the continent have the capabilities or the financial muscle to do so, I think pulling together and having institutions like the AFCFT or the African Union being able to build data centers or data banks harmonized all through, and we're able to deposit some of these immigration information, be it even our own passport details, and having a one harmonized aspect, and all these other platforms plugging into that one database and using AI to seamlessly have access to this information. Because as the earlier speakers were talking about, AI is all about the much data that you feed. So if we can collect this data and have a synchronized way of being able to distribute and create use cases depending on the immigration offices that are available, I think the impact will actually be felt.
Thank you so much, Felix. Going back to Linda, Felix has told us about the leveraging of AI in Africa to enhance mobility. But now in the Western countries, we've seen AI profiling systems. We've seen biases embedded in algorithmic decision-making systems. What biases are these?
I think the biases are looking at Africa the way we are at the moment. There are so many issues that we are facing that will be red flagged for so many things. So I feel like we are already classified. Some countries are classified at risk more than others. So I think we're already being biased in that situation. But at the same time, I think a machine cannot determine like the realities of a person who's migrating. And I like the fact that people are sharing their, experiences of getting visas and being rejected. But even the process of just submitting that document, I always tell people it's like I'm submitting a master's thesis, because I have to submit my bank statement for myself, the bank statement for my company, the registration thing for my company, I almost feel like I have to like put my, anything, any assets, just to tell them I'm a good migrant. And do we need to do that? I sometimes feel it's very humiliating when I have to do that. And I have actually boycotted some applications because I just don't want to do that, because I already know the system is biased towards me in that sense. But at the same time, I feel like the systems that they're creating is determining the profile of a person based on the information that they provide without actually checking. So I think the lady who mentioned that her bank statement was saying she had insufficient funds. What made that country make the decision to reject her on that basis under the assumption that she may not come back or whatever it may be? So was it a person or was it a machine? So I think there are so many risks, and we need to look at not only the algorithms that are in place, but also the structural flaws in terms of the decision making. Like, you'll tick the right boxes, but because you miss one thing, you actually can be denied a visa. So there's a huge risk in using AI for that. And also, just put a spin on it, just to say that migrants themselves are using AI to try to figure out how to navigate the visa process. So if we're both using AI, we're basically using AI to kind of like make ourselves get the right visa at the right time. So what does that mean for the future? You know, how do we now develop a system or a structure that actually responds effectively to the decision to say that Damaris is a good migrant to move? So I feel like there's so many biases, but also there's a data quality aspect that I think one of the speakers mentioned, that you'll get the information that is available, but not everything. And I feel like sometimes the interview process with a potential migrant, is useful for them to determine whether this person is a good fit. So I think the biases are something that we are learning to address, but I think we are still in the process of rectifying it with discussions, research, and engagements with each other, and conversations such as this.
Thank you, Linda, for that. We're moving online to Rai. From a human rights perspective, and I think some of the human rights violations have been named here, which human rights violations do you think are happening with the AI-driven immigration systems that are denying visas to Africans in the Western world? And what legal remedies should Africans then seek for? Two more last questions. I know we are 3 minutes past time, but just in 1 minute each. A question to Felix. What strategies can African states adopt to push back against digital exclusion and advocate for fairer global mobility systems?
Thank you. I think I'd rephrase that in okay. To answer to that, I'd say policy work should be harmonized in one or another. At the end of the day, as much as we want to implement the big agenda of free movement across the continent, we will have to harmonize the different policy frameworks that are there. We have here the free movement protocol, but it has to be domesticated in one or another. Secondly, we need to have a proper database. To be a bit practical, let's think about this. If today we were to have one depository of all our visa details, every country creates deposits its database with maybe the African Union, for example. And then from there, we're able to derive that data when we are accessing different points using that particular information that all deposited in one area. So it becomes very easy because I don't really need to have to apply so many things, because when I'm going to a new country, you actually know about me or something. And it's just being able to harmonize our systems and how our systems should communicate among each other. But finally, there's a lot of capacity building and a lot of infrastructure developments and adjustment that we need to co-share among different countries. Us being able to share the technologies that can kind of harmonize or streamline the different processes so that the same visa entry requirements or talk of the steps that I'll have to follow when getting into Kenya are the same steps I'll have to follow and going into Burundi. And finally, but not least, I think it needs to have a lot of political support. And it's all a conversation of as much as we will talk about free movement, do we really want to move freely? See, there is a talk and there's walking the talk. So if we say we need to drop visas tomorrow, they need to have been dropped yesterday. And those are the conversations that, the actual conversation that needs to be had, and not only had, but actually implemented. Thank you.
Last one to Linda. RAI just presented a lot of EU-funded migration frameworks and AI systems backed. But we have African perspectives. We have African mobility norms from how Africans have been moving for ages, even since before colonial times. How do you think African perspectives can be taken into consideration in global migration governance frameworks?
I think we play a critical role in shaping our narrative on migration. And usually what we do in the research that we do, we try to let the migrants speak for themselves. So we need to actually own that narrative space, and we need to be able to define what migration looks like for us to be able to now create that culturally appropriate way of moving. Because the way we're moving in Africa is not the way people move in Europe, because they have a free movement protocol that's going on. We are trying to kind of go back to what it was before colonialism. So how do we do that? And I like what Felix is saying about harmonizing our system. How do we break the idea that I'm Kenyan, I'm Tanzanian, I'm this? How do we now become African or East African? And I think that's been a tall order for some of us in this research space, because politically, economically, environmentally, we're challenged. There are barriers. And I think we can only just invest in knowledge production and how we can actually do that, but also not to focus on the national and the regional. We forget about the local decentralized level, because some people don't even know about free movement. Some people don't know that they can actually go to the next country without requiring documents, or they require documents. So I think the awareness needs to also trickle down to the local level for them to know about free movement protocol, for them to know about the AFCFTA in the most simplest terms, but to engage them at that level and making sure that they're all part of the process as we go along. So I think there's so much we are doing as researchers. There's so much we can do as legal practitioners and policymakers and policy advocates. And I think it's an ongoing process that we need to continue for the years to come. So maybe I end it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it from the panel. Great thank you to Marta Foresti, Rai Friedman, Felix Chege, and Professor Linda Adhiambo Oucho. Thank you too for the audience for listening to us. A great thank you to the Lawyers Hub for organizing this. As you can see, it's a very long topic that needs half a day to speak about. Thank you so much.